anyone has any objection to the conference being recorded, please let us know. It will still be recorded, but it will not be advertised on our website. So you can let us know if you do have any objections to the conference being recorded today, or you could choose not to participate. This, again, is the webinar for accessing assistive technology for individuals with disabilities. Today's webinar will feature a variety of assistive technology devices and services available to individuals with various disabilities and how to access them. Also discussed in today's webinar will be information about DADI, which is the Delaware Assistive Technology Initiative, including an overview of services and eligibility requirements for the program and how to access accessible instructional materials, or AIM, for students in school. A little about our presenter for today's webinar. Our presenter today is Ms. Karen Latimer, and hopefully all of you participating can see our presenter today. Ms. Latimer is the Assistive Technology Specialist for the Delaware Assistive Technology Initiative, or DADI, the Center for Disability Studies at the University of Delaware, and has been involved in the field of assistive technology and disability service for over 20 years. Before her service to DADI, Ms. Latimer was an AT specialist at the Pennsylvania Initiative on Assistive Technology and student support coordinator at Disability Services, Temple University. Prior to her service at Temple, she was the CEO at Tech for You, Adaptive Solutions, LLC, in Phoenix, Arizona, where she trained vocational rehabilitation counselors within the Veterans Administration and State Rehabilitation Services, and assisted individuals and families in attaining assistive technology solutions to enable them to work, live independently, or attend school. Ms. Latimer is a certified assistive technology practitioner in RESNA 2003, and it indicates her high level of commitment to assistive technology solutions. So without further ado, Karen, if you want to get started, hopefully I didn't botch that up too badly.
That was great. Thank you so much. And welcome everybody who is here. Can everybody still see and hear me okay?
Yes.
I hope. I know it's really hard. The webinars are hard. Now, hopefully everybody is seeing the slide show okay, and I'm trying to move my camera around so that I can see it and all of you as well, or some of you. And I really appreciate your taking the time to be with us today. I know it's a beautiful day, and I, like probably most of you, would prefer to be outside, so I really appreciate you spending the time. We are going to try and get through as much of this content as we can. There will probably be some sections that we don't get to today, and again, we will be sharing the rest of the PowerPoint with you, as well as having the PowerPoint and everything available to you on the website when we're finished. So we want to make sure that you have access to both the DADI information and my specific contact information. So it is here on the screen as well as on our website. Our website is dati.org, so it makes it pretty easy to remember how to find us. This is my direct contact information, so were you to dial this phone number today, you would get my desk, and I can't promise I'm so great at answering phone calls, but I am terrific at email. So if you can't get me on my desk, please do try me by email, and I'll get back to you very quickly. So what we want to talk about today is really accessing some very general AT equipment. And we want to talk a little bit at first about what terms you might hear when you're talking about AT and what it really breaks down to, what it really means. And for some of you, this might be new information. For a lot of you, hopefully it's review information. But for the purposes of being on the same page, I want to go over and cover some of this again. So please be patient with me if you've heard it before. And for those of you that it's new, I hope it's helpful when you go into your next IEP meeting or into your next opportunity to have a conversation. When we talk about AT, you might hear these terms commonly thrown around, but what people are really talking about when they use these terms is the stuff, the things that are commonly used, commonly referred to. They all pretty much are talking about, again, the actual equipment itself. What they're not really talking about, well, I guess let me back up a little bit and get to the actual definition. And the actual definition in the law is this one. Any item, piece of equipment, product, system, either acquired commercially, modified, or customized, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capacities of an individual with a disability. And I find this definition right out of the AT Act fascinating. And I oftentimes try to break this down a little bit because I do find it very, very interesting. You'll notice that the first part talks about the type of equipment that's used and the type of equipment that we define and call assistive technology. It doesn't talk about how complex it is. It doesn't talk about how much it costs. It doesn't talk about where you get it from specifically. It doesn't say who has to refer it or recommend it. It doesn't say you have to be a doctor or a therapist to obtain it. And I think it's really fascinating that right up until you get to the last 4 words, it really can mean just about any piece of equipment or any item. Most of us use assistive technology by this definition in almost every aspect of our daily lives. We use toothbrushes, we use pencils, we use a telephone, we use day planners, we use all types of things to help us to improve our functional capacity. And we do use items that are acquired, modified, set to our own specific standard. We use these things every day. Yet when we talk about using them for people with disabilities, somehow they freak us out. And they're really not that difficult. They're not all that different from the things that you or I use every single day. The only difference is when we take that pencil, this little standard pencil that you and I might use because we do not have a disability, it's a standard pencil. If we give it to someone with a disability and they use it, it is now a piece of assistive technology. The same stinking pencil that we just picked up from the dollar store, probably 25 of them, is now a piece of assistive technology because we've given it to an individual with a disability. And that's really the only, by this definition, the only difference. So it's really not something that we need to be afraid of or needs to intimidate us in any way. Any one of us is completely capable of picking up any tool, any screwdriver, any type of piece of equipment and apply it for someone's functional needs. That being said, the things themselves are very different than the services and supports that have to be applied to the thing itself in order for it to be an actual functional piece of equipment for that individual. And it is important to remember that the things themselves aren't going to do any good unless you have the network and the service and the people to help make it work. So we talked a little bit already about things being very simple and expensive or being really costly. It's important to remember that when we're looking at assistive technology for people, we don't really have to consider cognition as a factor for consideration or a barrier for using AT, but we do have to look at it as something that can be an adaptation or a positive or can be a negative, depending on what that particular piece of AT is and what the functional need is for the individual. What's really important to remember is that the individual has to accept it, they have to be motivated to use it, and it has to be supported in the home network community that the individual is living in order to be usable for them. We get calls all the time from people who say, I have a child or I have a family member who has this specific disability. What can I give them to make it easier for them? And I always try to explain to them that it really doesn't help me to know what that individual's disability is. It really would help me more to know what they're trying to do and what barriers do they face in trying to do that. So the functional limitation of the individual and the task they wish to do is actually quite more important for me to know than it is the disability itself. I can't give you anything for your child that has autism that's going to be helpful unless I know what they're trying to do and what their barriers to do that. And I hope that that makes sense to you. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat window or raise your hand, and one of us will try to answer that as we go along. When we're working with families, we're working with students, even though we may have funding that asks us to address a very specific section or a specific area of someone's AT need, we do try as AT professionals to look at the entire scope of that individual's life, from the moment they get up in the morning till the time they go to bed at night. And is the device or the solution that we're looking at going to stay with them from that entire time frame? Does it help when they get up? Does it help when they go to bed? Can it be used inside and outside? How long does the battery last if it's powered? Those types of questions are things we want to look at consistently and constantly as we're reviewing what someone's needs are, even though we may just be looking for activities in the educational setting, for example. At the very least, we may not be able to fund things in all of those settings, but at the very least, we don't want to be a barrier in any of those settings. So I often have people ask me, well, we can only look at things that the student might need in school. And that's oftentimes true. We are often limited by the funding source as to what we can look at and what we can't look at. But at the very least, we don't want to offer a student something that they, for example, can't use at recess or can't use at lunchtime or can't take home with them. Or we don't want to send something home with a student where they may not have electricity, or it may not be appropriate for them to use at home. So we don't want to hinder a student because we've given them a piece of technology. But if we can make it fit in all of those settings, that's definitely the ideal situation. We talked a little bit right when we started about the levels of assistive technology, and even when we're talking about looking in general, we try to break it into categories of what's kind of low tech and easy to make, easy to replace, what's middle tech or a little bit more costly, and what are the high-end needs. And often when we recommend one level, we want to have a backup of another. So if we have something that's really high tech for a student or an individual, we want to have a backup that may be mid or low tech in case the high tech isn't working or it can't be used in a specific environment. There's some backup technology for the individual that doesn't require power, for example, or doesn't require a more sterile environment. It might be something they could use outside or at lunch or in an art class versus their high-tech device that might be damaged in those settings. So it's important to remember that not one piece of technology is going to fit in all settings. So oftentimes when we solve one problem, we may be creating another. And having a low or mid-tech device to replace a high-tech one is a fabulous and very time and cost fitting solution for some of those areas. So we need to look at kind of all three when we're looking at solutions. If you're a parent and you're confused or a little bit frustrated at the process of evaluation, this is a really simple, easy kind of way to remember how you want to break down looking at an activity, looking at an evaluation, some of the quick and easy ways to try and frame what your educator, what your team is doing with your child. This is based off of the SET framework, which is the student, the environment, the task, and the tool. And just some quick questions about what is your child wanting to do? What skills do they need to have? What skills do they already have, and what do they need to learn, or what are they missing? Who's going to help them? What do they need to learn? What do they have to be able to do? And where and when and how is the activity being done? And this is really how we break down what kind of tools, what kind of supports are going to be needed in that particular situation before we go in and start breaking down the technology itself. We want to learn a little bit more about the types of things that the person is doing before we start trying to throw technology and tools at it. So in fact, the last thing that we normally do is throw technology and tools at. We would definitely want to have a really good picture of what skills are necessary. And one of the things that I constantly ask teachers in particular is, what goal are you trying to teach? What is the ultimate goal of this task? Is it to use the scissors and cut out the picture and paste it on the page, or is it to learn how to match? And can we do the activity differently, or do we have to bring technology tools to the problem? So if we can find another way to teach it, if we can find another activity the student is able to do more easily, physically or cognitively, then maybe that's an easier solution than trying to apply a piece of technology to it. I do want to quickly, I don't see any questions yet. Again, if you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand or throw it in the chat window. I do want to run very quickly through, if I can get the slide to turn. Here we go. Through the kind of categories of assistive technology. And again, if you have questions or if you see something you don't recognize, please feel free to raise a hand. Again, we'll talk a little bit further down the line about how to access assistive technology through DATI, for those of you who haven't done it. But for daily living skills, this is where creativity comes in really handy, things that you think that you have laying around the house that you don't think that can be used in a different way. We use a lot of tennis balls for jar openers and a lot of chip clips for book turning aids. But those are just a couple of examples of things that you can use around the house that are multi-purpose tools. Which one? I heard somebody say, what is that?
Does someone have a question?
No, maybe not. I thought I heard a question. But again, if you have a question, please feel free to throw it in the chat window. Computer access, there's a lot of questions from schools and from educators about family members about how to make computer access or make computers accessible for individuals. A lot of exciting new things in that arena with tablet computing. You can see some keyboard options here, some positioning options from the gentleman that's reclined in the bed. Positioning has a lot to do with computer access for individuals who have mobility needs. And that's often a somewhat challenging problem, but with the access and availability and cost of tablet computing, that's been made a little bit easier in some ways and more complicated in others. So you can see that we're using a lot of gaming switches and other types of things to make access to a computer a little bit more easy for this gentleman. But there's a lot of access things that we can do. Environmental controls include a lot of old-fashioned things that we've been using for years, including switches and ramps, and a lot of kind of new things. Door locks that are electronic or remote have taken the world a little by storm of late. We can also use apps and infrared controls for home access and home control, which is a real exciting new field. And allows our students to access not only their home but also their school environments in ways that are pretty exciting with smart board technology and access to that we've never been able to do before. So that's a fun new area. Learning and organization. Visual organizing software has become prolific in apps. And if you haven't seen those, a lot of them are free for both the iPad and, the i products and for Android products, as well as Windows and Mac. But teachers for years have been very familiar with using color and highlighters and folders. These are really effective organizing and low-cost, low-tech ways to keep people who have learning and organization, reading and writing disabilities, more unfocused, more organized. Being able to make things organized by color is very helpful in this arena. And if you need more help in this area, there is a lot of stuff written and a lot of things that we do have here at the ATI that can help you with that. Mobility is also an area with a lot of research and a lot of growing interest. These are a couple of fun, I don't want to say new because again it's changing so fast. There's new wheels out every day. I saw one just recently at a conference I was at that you could literally take apart in about 2.5 minutes and put in the trunk of your car, in the back seat actually. So there's stuff changing really quickly. But this is the sit-to-stand wheelchair up there on the top right, and then a beach or an all-terrain wheelchair, motorized wheelchair, down on the left, which is really fun at the shore. So we are seeing all kinds of neat new ways for people to get around. And predominantly that's because our individuals with disabilities, mobility disabilities in particular, are getting younger and they want to be more active. And so there's a lot more interest, renewed interest in recreation and active lifestyle technology, which is great fun. If any of you have an interest in recreation and therapeutic recreation, there's a lot of really neat stuff out there. Some of this is, again, available through DATI, the stuff that isn't customized anyway, so things like the golf clubs and some of the wheelchair accessories are available through the lending projects nationwide. I think a lot of you are probably familiar with the area of alternative communication. Also a growing and changing area right now with the tablet computing industry and the changes within the augmentative communication industry as a whole. So again, knowing what the student wants to do and where they want to do it is really important in this area, and how they communicate and organize themselves logically is an important part, and of course a good therapy team, also very important in this setting. Vehicle modifications are usually done specifically by providers who have a background in this particular area. With that being said, we pirate a lot of these parts for making other things. There's lots of things that we can do with the leftover pieces of vehicle modifications to make and create new parts and new desks and controls and activities for individuals in other settings. So if you find somebody who's had a vehicle mod, this is kind of fun if you can borrow some of those parts, if you're creative and like to be creative. This is another area that's growing really rapidly, thanks in part to smaller chip sizes in the area of computing. So iPod tablet readers are really taking over the areas that used to be dominated by things like these handheld magnifiers, starting to kind of go away in favor, even the ones that are the digital magnifiers, like these up here, are starting to get less and less effective because of the availability of the products and smartphones and things like that. So you're seeing more and more people use those instead of the older handheld technology. But they're still out there and people still use them. Oops, now I got myself in a pickle here. Hold on. So with hearing, there's also a lot of industry changes going on here with the reduction of analog telephones. There's a lot of confusion and change going on in the telephone industry. I'm sure not a lot of people are following that right now, but there's if you have someone in your family that deals with a hearing loss, you probably have heard on more than one occasion how difficult it is to make a telephone call these days. And that is because of the transition from analog to digital and how that's going. And there are a lot of, if you're not familiar with those changes, it's a very difficult time right now. The telephone manufacturers are aware of that, but the pace is not keeping up with what the regulation and the industry wants to do. So it has been a difficult process, and hopefully they're going to get that muddled through. But there are a lot of fun and new things going on there with hearing aids and the way they work with the environment. And one of those things is the process of looping and getting back to using loop technology. And a loop basically is a device that connects to a telecoil. A telecoil is a small unit that's put in most hearing aids and in all cochlear implants. And telecoils connect magnetically to landlines, most cell phones, and can be installed in in buildings and other places to really take the place of the FM systems, which, let me go back one, which are these systems over here is a full FM system. So what the telecoil does is it takes the, you still have the transmitter, which is this part right here where the microphone is. Pardon my sloppy writing there. You still have a transmitter or a microphone that's either worn or placed on a desk or hooked into a system. And instead of needing to have the user wear the headphone and this piece, the user uses their hearing aid. And the hearing aid picks up the actual sound that's being transmitted by the microphone through the telecoil and the coiling that's built in the building. So it's a very interesting process of a very different process of getting the sound to the hearing aid directly, and it does customize it quite a bit for the user. And you're seeing more and more of that. For more information, you can check out the hearingloss.org website or the loopamerica.org. We're seeing quite a bit more of that happening across the country. So we talked about how there are products and then there are services. And I'm going to move through this pretty quickly because these are just some examples of what services are. And in an ideal world, products would not be given to students without the follow-up services and hopefully ongoing services. This is a circle. We should be doing this as a constant and ongoing circle, and that's the way the IP is set up and supposed to work. So we go through the evaluation, the acquisition, the modification, the therapy, the training, the maintenance, and then we go back to evaluation. That's what the IEP is supposed to be for. If we need to reevaluate, reacquire, readapt, recoordinate, we do that. If we don't, we continue on until the next time. And that's what the circle of the IEP is supposed to ensure. It doesn't always work that way, but that's what's supposed to happen. I do want to talk quickly about instructional materials, as this is kind of a new, it's not a new idea, but it is a new process that's in place, and we want to make sure that parents and educators are familiar with how to get and how to talk about instructional materials. So what are they? What do they do? Here's the actual definition and what IDEA says about an instructional material. And I think you'll notice I always get a chuckle when people read this because I think this definition as it stands here is pretty darn vague. There's a lot of questions here. What is related core instruction? What kind of materials does that mean? Who are students with print disabilities? What's a specialized format? What's a timely manner? I mean, there's a lot more questions, I think, in that definition than there are answers. So the state of Delaware has done a really good job of kind of trying to help us out with that. So here are our four formats: Braille, audio, electronic text, and large print. Those are the four types of content. Here are the students who might benefit from instructional materials in an alternative format. Students who have trouble with reading or decoding, but they have a higher ability to comprehend when they're being read to by an adult. Students who do really well, but they don't do so good when they have to read and respond, so they have a comprehension issue. Students who have been successful in class, but again, mostly when they're being read to. Students who have reading intervention, struggling with content, and students who read fluently but lack comprehension. And I think we all know who these students are. So now we have two levels, if you like, or two flavors of qualification, and the IEP team makes the decision of who those two groups are going to be, or who those individuals are. The group A is kind of a traditional group of people, those who are blind or have a visual disability, those who can't hold a physical book. So they have a physical disability that makes it difficult for them to hold, turn the pages, that kind of an individual. Or someone who has an organic issue with reading. So somebody with an intellectual disability who has very clearly a reading disability basing from an organic dysfunction. These have always been the individuals who have qualified for National Library of Service and other types of very straightforward services for the blind. The Group B qualification has been the one that's always been a little bit difficult. We know these students really need the alternative format. I have a question from Nicole. Does this include those who are dyslexic? That's been the problem, Nicole. Group A traditionally did not, and we would fudge and try to get them qualified under a organic reading disability. But that has always depended on the agency and the school district and the local organization and everyone else to come up with, do they qualify or do they not? And some organizations have said yes they do, and others have said no they don't. So that's been the argument, which is why Group B came into place. So under Group B, these are the kids that we know who definitely benefit from instructional materials but have really never clearly qualified. In this category of student B, if the student has been determined by a neurologist, psychiatrist, a learning disability specialist, or a special education teacher, the school, the clinical psychologist, or someone who has a background in learning disabilities, the certifying IEP member can determine that they are eligible for instructional materials in alternative format. It does have to be documented in the IEP. So basically the IEP team with qualifying documentation can make the decision that the student needs the alternative formats. So this is where the individuals with dyslexia, auditory processing issues, all of those fuzzy kids end up qualifying. Another challenge for Nicole, or a question from Nicole, she's questioning the other challenge is her child was in a private school prior to the child find evaluation, which complicates things. Please talk. Yes, please call me offline, Nicole, and you'll have my contact information, and we can try and get that straightened out for you. But basically, these Group B qualified kids, as long as it's documented in the IEP and the IEP determines they need it, they will be able to get it under this new qualification standard. And here's where it basically goes in the IEP. It comes down here under this last section, down here. That section has to be checked. And here is how I'm rushing a little bit because I know we're over time, so I appreciate your patience while we finish this up. In deciding whether or not students are eligible, or if they need it, or what kind of tools they're going to need, there are two tools, the AIM Explorer and PAR. I think PAR is a little bit better myself, and this will be on, right now it's paper-based, but it will be online by the start of the school year. They allow you to take a reading evaluation with both human read and computer voices so that you can get an idea of how the child performs in both settings and whether or not they need computer-generated voice, human voice, what level they're performing at each, and kind of have that actual fact-based decision-making process. So these are great tools, and if your team is having difficulty deciding, will they benefit, will they not benefit, what tools will work, what tools they won't, this is a great place to refer them for specific information about how to do that and how to make that decision and get it documented on the student's IEP. These slides, again, will be available to you, and these are just some really neat examples of young people, young adults being very successful AT users in their home and eventually in their workplace. And then this slide is part of a presentation that my daughter, who's dyslexic, made for her school project this last year, and I thought she did such a great job, so I included that in there. But these were some of the slides that she put together about people, wonderful people who've had a history and struggled with their schooling because of their dyslexia. So I thought you might enjoy that. I do want to quickly go over what DATI has to offer you as parents, educators, and residents of Delaware. Basically, we have a number of activities, including training and technical assistance, which is some of what you're experiencing right now. We do device demonstrations, which is an opportunity for you to come in and try things out, play with it a little bit, learn about it, sit down and talk to one of our ATPs and really get an idea of what types of equipment are out there for you and or your family member that, or your student that might be of interest to you or to them. These are not designed to be evaluations. They're not assessing devices, but really trying to give you just some basic general information about what the product does and how it might compete or compare to a different type of device on the market. We don't do private instruction on a specific device, so if you have an iPad and want to know how to use it, that's kind of for the Apple Store. We don't really do that, unfortunately. But we can certainly give you information about where in town you can find that. We also run the lending library, which kind of is exactly what it sounds. We do free short-term loans of all of our technology. It is not determined on age or income or where you live. You do have to be a Delaware resident, but other than that, it doesn't matter. And it's designed really to give you, again, a flavor of how that device would work for you or your child in your home setting and community. You can find the catalog of things that are available inside of our website, and it does give you a searchable inventory there. If you can't find what you're looking for, so you're certainly welcome to call one of us, and we will be happy to help you find exactly what you're looking for and complete a loan request, which is very simple, by the way. We also run the AT Exchange program, and this is kind of like a Craigslist for things that you might be looking for a family member. There's everything from medical equipment all the way up through basic computers. We recently had pediatric hearing aids on there, so we never really sure what's going to come up, but they're almost always used items and often free. Sometimes there's a small fee or transportation fee or a mailing fee involved. Just depends on what individuals have put up there. We don't control what people put up there. We do monitor the website, but we really don't have a lot of direct influence on it. And the website is listed there for your information, but it does link right off of our homepage. I thank you so much for your time. I will be happy to take any kind of questions you might have. I know we ran a little bit over, so I appreciate your hanging around. And again, this is a screenshot of our web page there as it stands right now. We are looking at making some modifications to it, so any input you might have to that would be great. You can see a couple of places that I mentioned. We have our AT Exchange right here and our equipment and demo loan right there. Our 3 location sites are up here, which you can find in the Contact Us section if you need to find the exact location. And our main site listed up here at the top, which is where I am on the University of Delaware campus. So if anyone has any questions, I am more than happy to take them.
You can also, again, use the chat feature. If you are speaking and for some reason we're unable to hear you, you might want to try hitting *6, and hopefully that unmutes, but no one should be muted on the phone. If there are no questions, Karen, I just want to thank you once again for taking the time to share this valuable information, and I hope the participants have found this information to be useful. The webinar will be uploaded to our website probably in the next few weeks, so keep an eye out for that. And once it is uploaded, please feel free to share the information with friends, family members, colleagues that may benefit from this information as well. Again, Ms. Latimer did include her contact information, so if you have a specific question, you can feel free to contact her directly, or you can call Parent Information Center at 302-999-7394. Very quickly before we disconnect, everyone that participated today will receive a survey link immediately following the webinar. I do ask if you could take a few moments to complete that. That does help us improve our services to families and professionals in the community. So if you could take a few minutes once you receive that to complete that survey, that would be great. So if we don't have any other questions, we'll go ahead and close out. Again, thank you all for taking the time out to participate in today's webinar. If you have any additional questions, feel free to give us a call. Thank you. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, everybody, for attending.